Part 3, delegate or not delegate. That's going to be your question. Can you delegate? Should you delegate? And the question will always come down to, is this something that you need to perform to make a clinical decision? Is it a high-level assessment? Is it an evaluation? No, you can't delegate that. Is it a task? Is it passing meds? Is it dressing changes, ambulation, toileting? These are time management tools for you. They can be used as staff motivation too, believe it or not. Assigning tasks can motivate staff, especially if they're a little bit higher level tasks than they're used to. If it helps them grow, that's a motivational tool. Now, delegation red flags, going back to complex nursing activity. Is the patient having blood pressures that are up and down, heart rates that are up and down? Are they having wonky breathing patterns? This is complex nursing activity, not going to delegate. What's wrong with the patient? You don't know? Really? If you don't know, you're not going to delegate that out. Does the person have the information that they need, the knowledge and skills to do the job? If they don't, that's a problem. Do you have the chance to train somebody? See, if you train somebody how to do a skill, now that may become a delegable skill. But if you don't have time to train them, you can't skill it. And if you can't monitor and supervise, if you don't have the time to do that, then you simply can't delegate. Because remember, if you don't supervise, it isn't delegation. You have to make sure you use the right level of communication. So every client must have RN supervision. That does not mean every client must have an RN providing day-to-day care. You can have a nursing home with 30, 40, 60 residents and only one RN, and that RN is not doing all the work. The work is being done by LPNs and med techs and CNAs. But there's one RN that is the supervision of everybody. All right, so everybody must have an RN supervising their cares, but that does not mean the RN is doing the cares. Every nursing assistant and LPN must have an RN supervisor, indirect or indirect. It doesn't have to be continuous. So you can have that one RN in the building providing care to everybody. In fact, I know of facilities that even function without an RN at night, but there's an RN on call. So an RN is available if needed. That is legitimate supervision. I don't like it. I'd be really uncomfortable with it. But that is legitimate supervision because they have somebody available indirectly. Specify responsibility and authority when you give the task to. If you're giving a task out, you can tell the LPN, take care of John, and if he needs something, food, walk, go ahead and do that as needed. That's giving them authority to make a decision, but you're still delegating everything. So when you communicate correctly, you're always going to make sure that you know who will do something, what they'll do, the deadline, how they're going to do it, where they're going to do it, and most importantly, why they will do it. Now, there are a couple things in here. The where is usually inferred. If you tell them that you need to give a bath to Mary, well, the inference is that will take place in the bathroom, right? And the why doesn't always have to be stated either. You need to feed your patient. Well, are you going to tell them you'll use a spoon to feed the patient, and you'll make sure that they swallow before you give them another food? You probably shouldn't have to give that level. Well, let me rephrase that. If you have to give that level of detail, there's a bigger problem than just delegating. Would you agree? You'll also make sure that they understand the priority of activities. What needs to get done first? The expected timelines. And be liberal. How do you like it when an instructor says, take care of these people and have your work done by 4:05? Well, if that's a reasonable time frame, great. But if I give you the assignment at 4 o'clock, is that reasonable time? Probably not. So give realistic timelines. Short timelines, unless there's a really big why, short timelines only cause stress and problems. Are there any reportable conditions? Let them know. When you're doing the ADLs on Mary, sorry, I'm human. If you're doing the ADLs on Mary and she has a fever of 102, you better tell me right away. Now they're clear. They know what they need to do. And make sure that there's supervision and assistance available. Not necessarily right with them, but available if needed. Now, are there any red flags in communication? Oh, yeah. Have you ever seen a person refuse to accept delegation? That's a problem. Or you give incomplete directions. That's a bigger problem. See, that's a problem on you. A person who refuses to accept delegation, you're probably going to have to dig into that for a little bit and find out why. Could be that they don't buy the why. Could be that they're not capable of doing it for one reason or another. You need to find out. And failure to confirm expectations. Again, no follow-up. If you don't follow up, there's no communications. Remember, communication, it takes a speaker, a listener, and the message. And then feedback that the listener heard it. So what about feedback? How do you give feedback? Look at who are you leading. See, that'll dictate a lot of what you're doing. Do you have a team of CNAs? Or do you have a team with some LPNs and CNAs? You'll give different feedback to different people. Look at the task and relationship behaviors. Are you having to give detailed lists? Or can you just tell people what needs to get done and then they do it? Are there any controls built into the system? And by that I mean areas where you, by definition, have to step in and do something. That's a great time for feedback, and a great way as a reminder of feedback. So what about, how do you give right feedback? Well, and the right supervision. The amount of supervision is very dependent upon what's going on. Is your patient more critically ill? They need more supervision. So are they stable or not? Are they competent? Is the delegee, the person you're delegating, are they truly competent? Do they really know their stuff, or do they just kind of know it? What type of task is it? Is it high level or low level? You can delegate high level tasks if it's to the right person. And are you available to supervise? If you are tied up doing a high level skill in one room, and that will keep you tied up for the next half hour, you delegate at your own risk, because for the next half hour you are unable to supervise. Supervision red flags. If the client's condition rapidly changes, that's going to change your workload, either up or down. Did the delegee not report unexpected events? Did you tell them to report unexpected events? So that could be a problem on both ends. The work wasn't completed, or was completed incorrectly. Now that could be a training issue, a delegation issue, or a supervision issue. Inadequate communication from the nurse or from the assistant, or there's no monitoring. No monitoring is probably a very common event, and that is all on the nurse. If you're not monitoring it, you have nobody to blame but yourself when something goes wrong. Because when you delegate, you are assuming responsibility. So accountability, who is accountable? Accountability is being answerable for what one has done and standing behind that decision or action. So when you delegate, you are assuming accountability. You are saying, I'm going to have you do this job, I'm responsible for it. So when a CNA or LPN performs incorrectly, no, you aren't responsible necessarily. If they've been properly trained, if you gave the right task to the right person, they are still responsible for that. If you neglect to supervise, if you neglect to follow up, or you incorrectly delegate, you delegate something to someone who was not trained, that's your problem. Now you are at risk. So that's a part of delegation that makes people very nervous. The idea of of giving an assignment that could come back to bite them. But that's all part of this job. That's what you're going to have to do as a nurse. Of course, evaluation, there are red flags for evaluation. If you don't evaluate effectiveness, that's a big thing. If you don't learn from work experience, if they don't learn from their job, if you don't learn from them, that's a problem. And then the other, if you don't have the authority to actually intervene and take corrective action, that's a problem. It's possible for a task to be delegated, and you really don't have any authority if something goes wrong. See, that's something that should not be delegated. Let's come back for learning plan part 4.